For a couple of months now, Fox has been claiming that those lockdowns, the social distancing, the wearing the masks, all of that stuff that we all took part in together to save lives, that was probably just a waste of time. There's no science behind it. You heard that night after night on Tucker Carlson saying that the lockdowns had nothing to do with the flattening of the curve. There was no science leading us to start them, and no evidence that they actually mattered. He was probably the foremost purveyor of this sort of line of thinking. But he wasn't the only one. Laura Ingraham once said on May 4th, although intuitively I think it probably seemed like social distancing would be necessary, there was no real scientific basis for believing that, since it had never been studied. Yes, there was no scientific reason to believe that if you had an infectious disease, you should stay away from other people. There was no reason to believe that that was true. Well, JR, I can only imagine how much coverage there's going to be on Fox throughout this week, because there have now been multiple studies that have shown that those lockdowns saved an incredible number of lives. And I know there's no reason for me to cover it right now because they're going to cover it in depth exhaustively. But you know what? Let's go through the motions. So 2 peer-reviewed studies have now been released in the journal Nature. One of the studies estimated the number of COVID-19 cases with and without the tough interventions, the lockdowns that were put in place. In the US alone, the measures stopped 4.8 million more confirmed cases of COVID-19 and up to 60 million infections in total. In China, they prevented 285 million infections. In a second study, researchers looked at the number of deaths from COVID-19 in 11 countries in Europe. They found that 3.1 million deaths in these countries were avoided with pandemic control measures. These are scientific studies conducted by multiple groups, peer-reviewed, and published in academic journals. And so I'm sure if you were one of the researchers who contributed to this or wrote it, just have your phone handy, because Tucker and Ingram, they're going to be calling you up to come talk about the amazing research that you have now produced.
Well, the thing is some of those numbers come from Europe, Italy, European countries. So, of course, we know that those things have nothing to do with America. Hey, that science and those studies and those reviews have nothing to do with American stats, American science, because American science apparently has only thing to do with, hey, let's make sure that we have things that fit the narrative. And anybody who doesn't do that apparently is a liar, a scientist, and doesn't really do real research, doesn't do real science. It has to fit the right narrative, because you know what you will hear. You know what you will hear from Tucker and from Laura real soon, because cases will spike. The protests going on in the country are going to cause more cases to go up, just because that's the natural way. It's going to be tons of people in the streets. There's already some reports of National Guardsmen from Missouri and Mississippi that came into D.C. that weren't wearing masks, and cases have already hit specifically with those groups, right? So, of course, it's going to happen with protesters as well. You know what Fox News pundits are going to say? Hey, so you know what? All these people out in the streets have sparked a spread of COVID-19. And you know what? They'll be right. But you know what? They're going to have to contradict their previous statements in saying that people getting out in the streets and wanting to go and get their hair cut, it won't spread coronavirus. Hey, these things are overblown. Suddenly, it won't be overblown to get out in the streets and be around people and spread the virus, right? They're gonna have to contradict themselves, because it's gonna fit the second narrative of pushing back on protesters and people wanting the police to stop beating up on black people and murdering them.
Yeah, they're stuck between a rock and a deranged place. And the thing is, of course, as we've noted, the protesters, by and large, do appear to be wearing masks universally. In a lot of cases, the police aren't, and the National Guard aren't necessarily, but the protesters are.
I'm sorry, John. And this is the thing: many of those protesters are wearing masks. And then once tear gas comes, once batons come, once rubber bullets come, sometimes those masks probably get snatched down. Probably people trying to breathe from tear gas being blasted at them and smoke screens being put in their face. Those things will change the effectiveness of masks. So maybe if the battles and wars weren't being initiated in the streets by cops and National Guards, and then as Trump wants the full-on military, if those don't happen, maybe we have a better chance of having people peacefully protest, and then have way more of them keep their masks on their faces.
Yeah. And, I retweeted an article showing a spike in cases in Texas. There's a number of states that have a spike in cases, and not just cases. You expect that cases are going to go up as testing becomes more universal. Although, by the way, while testing has been increasing on average day by day, it has not universally been the case. There was a big drop-off just a few days ago of number of daily tests across the U.S. It is still a significant concern, but we have good news in that area as well. And again, I expect that Tucker is going to be pushing this, but a new study published today, population-wide face mask use could push COVID-19 transmission down to controllable levels for national epidemics and could prevent further waves of the pandemic disease when combined with lockdowns. So in some cases, you are going to need targeted lockdowns of areas where you see infections spreading, but people universally using the masks could help us stop having to completely shut down a national economy again. And since Fox says that's what they want to avoid, then I should see them telling people how important it is for them to wear masks. But they're not going to do that because they don't actually care, even though it is saving the lives of their viewers. As we noted not long ago, another study shows that if we had started our lockdowns just slightly earlier, tens of thousands of deaths could have been saved. That's just like 1 week earlier. We could have done it even earlier than that, but that's tens of thousands. And so thank God we did something at the very least, but still we've lost far more than 110,000 people. It could have been much better. It also could have been much worse if we had just gone with Trump's first plan, which was to let everyone catch the disease, and those who died, died.
Well, considering the only plan and the only thing he's been touting along with his supporters is, I shut down the border. I stopped travel. I stopped immigration. So that is his only claim to doing anything about this, which once it's already in the country, hey, you can shut down all the borders you want. It's here. It's so once, and again, that's a cause for like early action on it. And if we didn't, the fact, I said this before, the fact that numbers were what they were before he finally got started, if you did it in a better way, the numbers wouldn't be anywhere near that, and we wouldn't be hearing about it to the same degree that we heard about it. And then that's the no news thing that he's not good at. So once the news started, then he reacts. He doesn't act, he reacts. And a lot of times once it's already bad, your reactions are even worse because he doesn't know how to handle things.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just so like it's insane to spend weeks and weeks with your multi-million-dollar staff in studio telling people that masks don't stop the spread of disease and social distancing isn't necessary while they're broadcasting from home and all of that. But now that they've been begging to see people's, citations, now it's out there. They're not interested. Maybe there's a reason for that. That's all I'm saying. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.